Okay, today's lecture is the prevention and stopping of miscarriage and prevention of premature delivery using topical, transdermal, natural progesterone and avoiding abortifacients. My name is Renry MD. My pen name is Peter Eckhart MD. I've been doing this for 20 years, and you'll find me at Peter Eckhart MD on the web. So if you go to YouTube and you search for natural progesterone shot in the butt, what you'll find is that the IVF fertility MDs are using progesterone shots in the butt to maintain the pregnancy for these women. But here is my patient.
Hi, my name is Christy Schaefer, and I just wanted to share my experience with Progesterone. So about 3 years ago, I was pregnant with number 7. I was 38, I'm 39 now. So anyway, I was pregnant with number 7 and I miscarried. So I was about 9 weeks and miscarried. So then I quickly got pregnant about a month later, and 8 weeks into that pregnancy, I started spotting quite a bit. So I was very concerned that, oh no, here goes again, like I'm having another miscarriage here, what's going on? I had, prior to that, 6 children, fine, healthy. I am somebody into natural health and herbs and things like that, so I was just really questioning what was going on with my body. And so I happened to call this friend of a friend and just kind of shared with her what was going on with the spotting, and she had used Progesterone in the past because she's been very high in estrogen and low in progesterone, and it's really helped her a lot with her pregnancies. So she told me all about it and said that she felt like I was really probably estrogen dominant and low in progesterone. And based on some of the answers I gave her with the questions she asked, she just said, I really feel like you need to get on this right away. So she happened to have a bottle at her house, so her husband drove it over here, and I took it immediately. And within a few hours, it was probably like 3 or 4 hours, the spotting stopped. So I just felt so much peace that yes, this was an answer, and I was like, wow, this was like an answer to prayer, because I just felt so horrible, like to have to maybe go through this miscarriage again and what's going on with my body. And when she shared everything with me, I was shocked. And then she was telling me, like, what herbs are you taking right now? And I was taking like certain herbs that were good for the uterus, supposedly, but they were a lot of the herbs that were in here that mimic, estrogens and estrogen in the body. And if I'm already high in estrogen and I'm taking all this stuff, so I was just like shocked. Like I was doing everything at that point, if I was low in progesterone, that I should not be doing. Peppermint toothpaste and just all these things that I was doing, thinking that I was doing things the right way, but it was obviously hindering my body. And so I just thought it was really amazing that when I took that, the bleeding stopped. So I truly believe that this helped me totally. This helped my body and prevented me from having a miscarriage. So I would totally, I have shared this with a few people about this product, and I have talked to Dr. Eckhart, and he has been a great help to me with questions that I've had. And I stand behind Progesterone, 100%. So just wanted to share my story and my experience with Progesterone. Thanks.
So I prevented 300 or 400 miscarriages over the phone in the last 20 years in women with previous miscarriages. I've had 12 to 14 failures. Those failures, maybe they came to me when they're already bleeding. I prevented approximately about 6 early deliveries. The oldest one was a 50-year-old. She took McKenna to prevent her early delivery, which the McKenna actually increased contractions. She stopped the McKenna, took the topical progesterone, her uterus calmed down, and she was actually able to deliver successfully a healthy baby. Today I'm going to tell you a simple way to prevent miscarriage to use in your patients using over-the-counter topical transdermal progesterone from John Lee, MD. what your doctor may not tell you about menopause. And I'm going to tell you how to prevent early delivery in some patients. So spoiler alert, in my opinion, most miscarriages at 5 to 8 weeks are progesterone deficiency, or an herb that's an abortifacient. Some of these herbs actually block progesterone. So these herbs that you're taking them, they're natural, they're organic, but they actually are used traditionally to cause miscarriages. So the plan today, we're going to look at the studies done on progesterone. We're going to talk about herbs that are traditionally used to create abortions. We're going to talk about transdermal dosing and the route of entry of progesterone into the body. And we're going to talk about, lastly, prenatal nutrition. So let's talk about progesterone. Pro means for, gesterone means for gestation. So women must have sufficient levels of progesterone to maintain the pregnancy. So if your level of progesterone is too low, you're going to have a miscarriage. Early in the pregnancy, progesterone encourages the thickening of the lining of the uterus so that the embryo can implant. Okay, so here are the studies to prevent early delivery. 2011, Hassan MD used 90 milligrams a day vaginal micronized progesterone in women with short cervices, which is a marker for early delivery, and lowered preterm birth rates before 33 weeks from 16% to 8.9%. Out of 465 women from 19 to 24 weeks, they were giving vaginal micronized progesterone. Respiratory distress syndrome, or RDS, was lowered to 7.7% versus 13.5%. In 2007, Fonseca, MD, used micronized progesterone, 200 milligrams, vaginal progesterone pills for short cervical length of 15 millimeters at 22 weeks in 413 women out of 24,620 women. 250 were getting vaginal progesterone pills versus placebo. Early delivery was 19.2% versus 34.4%. But O'Brien showed that 90 milligrams progesterone gel in the vagina for 659 women with a history of preterm birth showed no change. But a follow-up study showed that women with short cervices of less than 28 millimeters at 20 weeks, 46 of these women, 19 received progesterone at 0 early delivery, and 27 of these women with no progesterone had 29.6% early delivery to the neonatal ICU. In my opinion, O'Brien's dose was too low, even though he still had success in women with short cervices. It may also be that the women were taking some kind of herbs that were actually causing miscarriage. So there have been some studies to prevent miscarriage. Stevenson, MD, treated 59 women with elevated N-cyclin E, a marker for miscarriage, and after 100 to 200 milligrams per day of vaginal micronized progesterone, 69% pregnancy versus 6% previously. 57 women with normal N-cyclin E had 68% versus 51%. Kamarasi, however, MD, 404 women, given vaginal progesterone, 400 milligrams BID, 423 were placebo. Okay, live birth was 65.8% progesterone versus 63.3%. In my opinion, they ignore herbs that block progesterone, herbs that cause miscarriage. So the likely cause of miscarriage in 5 to 8 weeks, herbs that cause miscarriage, sometimes progesterone blockers, a progesterone deficiency, or A, after 35 years old, a corpus luteal phase defect, which means their ovaries are not producing enough progesterone, or B, stress causing a cortisol steal, or exercise heavy lifting up to 8 weeks of gestation. So let's talk about herbs that cause miscarriage at first. Okay, tansy, pennyroyal, aloes, hellebore, rue, ergot, cottonroot as late as 1939 were effective and commercialized in the USA. The FTC did not like it. So all these herbs were used in commercial products as late as 1939 to create miscarriage. Cotton bark, it's the cotton found in clothes, is used to create miscarriage. And this cotton bark is found in Egypt and, I believe, India. Interestingly enough, cottonseed oil contains gossypol, and gossypol creates low sperm counts, low sperm motility, and then permanent infertility in men. The Chinese Communist Party explored its use for population control. Gossypol is also found in okra seeds, trace amounts, and cacao seeds, which is the mallow family. Refined cottonseed oil is supposed to be free of gossypol. Aloe is traditionally used as a contraceptive and has abortive effects. The alcohol extraction prevented implantation. In the 1930s, it was sold in the United States to create abortions. Artemisia is the goddess of infertility. Goddess of fertility. And in 1979, 10 milligrams of the active component of scopolamine, rats fed 7 days every day following coitus had a 100% termination. Asurum, the ancient Greeks in folk medicine boiled the roots in a medieval tonic to induce menstruation. Birthwort was used in ancient Egypt to ease childbirth. Had abortive and contraceptive effects. Aristolochia acid is 100% effective in mice fed on days 6 to 7 after coitus. Stronger dose will stop a midterm pregnancy. Some other herbs that cause miscarriage. Celery, which is in the fennel family. Ancient Egypt used that as a contraceptive. Celery seed was used in medieval Europe, India, Africa. Celery seeds in high doses are effective to cause miscarriage. Chastity, which is vitex. Gladiators slept on branches to prevent erections. Seeds cause early miscarriage. The vitex will goose the corpus luteum to produce more progesterone, and people use this for PMS. So paradoxically, vitex is used to increase progesterone if you have a corpus luteum that's producing progesterone, but vitex can actually be used to create miscarriage. Dittany, which is the mint family, the Greeks and Romans used that to induce menstruation to expel the fetus. 3 grams of seeds will induce miscarriage in the 3rd month of pregnancy. Ferns are also measured in the ancient world. Capillus verneus, the hair of love, inhibits implantation. Ancient China, they used this as an abortifacient, a contraceptive in Hungary, New Guinea, and medieval Europe as well. Juniper is frequently mentioned as a contraceptive, abortifacient. It's rubbed on the penis before coitus. This has been well documented. Other herbs that cause miscarriage is cypress, which is juniper related as well. It's a menstrual regulator, abortifacient, and classical abortifacient used in medieval Europe, Peru, and Paraguay. Anything of the mint family, sage, marjoram, thyme, rosemary, hyssop, inhibit gonadotropin and prolactin secretion. Abortifacients, contraceptives are boiled with juniper and cypress and mixed with sweet wine and drunk. So again, mint, anything in the mint family, peppermint, spearmint, anything in the mint family, mint toothpaste, please do not take that if you are pregnant. Willow and poplar used to be mixed with honey. The trihydroxyestrogen, which is an endocrine disruptor, stops implantation. Myrrh was actually used as a contraceptive and abortifacient as well. Pennyroyal, modern studies confirm that pulgone contraceptive is an abortifacient. If you take too much, it's toxic to the liver. In one case, the lady took too much pennyroyal and it killed both the mother and baby. All the herbs that cause miscarriage, you'll find this in the state of Texas, where I am now. You'll go into the lawn, and this will be a weed, and you can take out the seeds of this, right? And you can chew on this, and this will cause miscarriage in humans. The extracts of seeds in mice, rats, and guinea pigs, rabbits stop implantation. Rue is used in abortion. The chilpensin is can be used to reduce rat offspring by 20 to 70%. Squirting cucumber is mentioned by Hippocrates. Modern testing has shown that it stops ovulation. Pomegranate, Greeks used seeds, skin as abortifacient contraceptive. And I did have, women taking progesterone early delivery at 30 weeks, women eating, I had this one woman who was taking progesterone. She had an early delivery at 30 weeks. Because she was taking progesterone, pomegranate rather. And I did have a woman call me, and she started having contractions, and it turned out that night she was eating chocolate-covered pomegranate seeds. I also had another patient who had endometriosis. She loved pomegranate, and the pomegranate was on sale at Trader Joe's. She bought a whole case of it, and she ate the whole case, and she had massive, flaring of endometriosis for a week or so. Agave. This is used in Mexico as an abortifacient and contraceptive. I had one patient where they were trying to have a baby for 8 years, and they followed our recommended product sheet of just following the recommended products that do not have endocrine disruptors. And without even trying, she was pregnant in about 3 months. And so she didn't know she was pregnant. She called me up. She was feeling quite guilty. She had been drinking alcohol, and she started to have contractions. And she realized she was pregnant. And she called me up feeling guilty, asking, can alcohol cause contractions? I said, no, alcohol usually stops contractions. I said, wait a minute, what kind of alcohol are you drinking? And she said, I was drinking tequila. And I said, well, let's go look it up. So it turns out that agave is used in Mexico in the folk medicine as an abortifacient. So again, it's not hard to get this. You go down to Costco, you buy agave syrup, you take that agave syrup, and it'll cause a miscarriage. Hibiscus tea is used as a contraceptive and abortifacient in Polynesia. So again, you just go to the grocery store, buy hibiscus tea, and if you're pregnant, that's not a good thing to do. Green papayas, what happens is you'll go to a Thai restaurant. I love Thai food myself. There's a green papaya salad, and if you're pregnant, I suggest that you do not take that. Again, it's an abortifacient, the green papayas, but as the fruit ripens, the abortifacient ability decreases. Okay, so again, you want to avoid all herbs or chemicals that block progesterone or cause abortion, and a lot of these chemicals and herbs can be found in everyday cosmetics and toiletries that you would put on the skin or eat. Okay, so let's talk about low progesterone. Progesterone seems to be lower the older you get. So if the woman is 35 years, when and if they ovulate, the progesterone levels are lower. And so that was that one woman that you saw at the beginning of this lecture. She was aged 39, and she probably had low progesterone in the beginning of her pregnancy, and that was generating some bleeding. The oldest patient I've got using progesterone is a 50-year-old, and she came out with a healthy child. And again, we use progesterone to stop early delivery and stop also early premature miscarriage. So also physical and psychological stress can lead to cortisol, steel, and steel whey raw materials used to make progesterone. So again, what happens is that if you look at this steroid hormone cascade, what you can see is that cholesterol's at the top. You make pregnenolone, and then you make progesterone, and then progesterone is used to make cortisol. Okay, and then you go on the other side of this steroid hormone cascade, and you make estradiol, estrone, estriol. And so what happens is that if you have any psychological stress or physical stress, your body increases the production of cortisol to deal with that stress. And if you are too stressed out, what happens is that you take away from the progesterone, you take away from the progesterone that your body makes to make cortisol to deal with the stress. And because you have low progesterone, it will create a miscarriage. So I'll give you one example of this. I had one lady, she was in Peru. She was age 35, and she was pregnant 6 weeks. And she started to have spotting, vaginal spotting, and she was pregnant at 6 weeks. And so I said, I told her about this progesterone. I said, she was down in Peru. She's an American, married a Peruvian farmer there. And I started to tell her about this cortisol steal going on. I said, did you do anything stressful in the past couple weeks? He said, yeah. 3 weeks earlier, they had some kind of big argument, family argument, and she was really stressed out. And then she began to notice that she started to having some vaginal spotting. So we gave her progesterone. The vaginal spotting stopped. And as of now, I think she's about like 7 months pregnant still. So we're going to see how that turns out. Okay, other advice, no strenuous hikes, especially from 0 to 18 weeks. particularly high impact exercise, i.e. jogging, ball games, and racket sports, was associated with an increased risk of miscarriage. No association was seen between exercise and risk of miscarriage after 18 weeks of gestation. This is according to a Danish study with 92,671 pregnancies. I had 2 patients starting to miscarry after walking and hiking several miles. When in their early, I want to say 6 weeks pregnant. I had one lady who was an immigrant from an African country. She was in California, and she had a prior miscarriage. And she and her husband went hiking, and she goes, I really pushed it, and then she started to have a miscarriage after the hike. And another lady who had recurrent miscarriages, and she would walk 2 miles a day. I said, no, both of you guys have to stop doing that. Okay, no carrying or lifting heavy objects. The risk of miscarriage increased with the number of lifts and total burden lifted per day at work. This may be a case for advising pregnant women against heavy lifting, in particular during the early pregnancy. This is a Danish study of 71,500 women. So again, anxiety, fear, and stress from physical or psychological results in a cortisol steal. And again, if you're going through extremely stressful hiking, this physical stress will also cause a cortisol steal as well. Okay, so what you can do to counter this is you can double or triple the progesterone to stop a miscarriage. Okay, usually I give 60 milligrams a day, divided 30 milligrams in the morning, 30 milligrams at night. But if you have a patient that is having a miscarriage because of strenuous exercise, you can double or triple the progesterone. Okay, and in some cases I was able to stop the miscarriages, and other cases I was not. So this is the progesterone levels in pregnancy, and as you look at the y-axis, this shows you the progesterone level, okay, from 0 to 180 nanograms per milliliter, and then it shows you the weeks gestation, okay. So the total gestation, a full gestation, is 40 weeks. And so at the very beginning, you have 3 trimesters, the first, second, and third trimester. The solid dark line there is the mean or average progesterone level. And so what you can see is that in the first trimester, what happens is that the corpus luteum on the ovaries is producing progesterone to maintain the pregnancy, and you're at 21, 22, 30, 33, 39, right? The 2 dotted lines, and then what happens in the second and third trimester, the placenta begins to kick out progesterone, begins to be dominated by the placenta, and that begins to put in a whole bunch of progesterone. So in the beginning, you're making maybe 20 milligrams a day of progesterone, but near the end, the placenta is kicking out 400 milligrams of progesterone a day. And what this means is that the therapeutic range for progesterone is quite wide. The 2 dotted lines on either side of the mean are the second or 2 standard deviations up and 2 standard deviations down. And now the question is, what is that gray line? Okay, and if you look at the gray line, those are autoimmune patients. So Dr. Beer MD, documented, okay, that actual antibodies against progesterone. So if you have an autoimmune patient, they actually develop antibodies against progesterone, and the progesterone will be low. Okay. So normally what you can do is you would taper off the progesterone at week 16, okay? And then I would taper it. I usually use 30 milligrams in the morning, 30 milligrams at night, and taper it off 10 milligrams every week. So at week 16, I'd be using 30 in the morning, 30 in the night. Week 17, I'd be using maybe 30 in the morning, 20 at night. At week 18, I'd be using 20 in the morning and 20 at night, and so on and so on and so on, and just, drop it off very slowly. Now, some other guys may drop it off suddenly going, hey, look, you have high progesterone. But the problem with that is if you have an autoimmune patient and you drop it suddenly, well, then you're going to have contractions and you're going to have a miscarriage. So if you drop it off and taper it very slowly, what will happen is that you'll have some contractions, and then you can take up the progesterone, okay? And then you can take that progesterone, have it throughout the entire pregnancy, and you'll maintain the pregnancy and you'll have a happy pregnancy. Okay? So usually miscarriage at 5 to 8 weeks of progesterone deficiency or herbal block of progesterone. Again, in the first trimester, the ovary or produces progesterone on the corpus luteum. Okay? And then the second and third trimester, the placenta is producing progesterone. Okay? Over the age of 35, you have a possible corpus luteal defect in which you'll have lowered progesterone, and you may have to supplement her in the first trimester. Okay. Again, I talked about that one patient improved was stressed out from a family argument and she started bleeding. All right. And then I like to taper it and do a sudden stop. So it's important to remember, this as in the previous lecture, that the active portion of the progesterone is the one that's not bound to the sex hormone binding globulin. So remember, this dark line here is very important, that this is progesterone that's bound to sex hormone binding globulin. Okay? And that progesterone that's bound to sex hormone binding globulin, SHBG, okay, is not the effective one. The effective one is the one that's free progesterone, that's not bound. Okay? So when you use 30 milligrams of progesterone in the morning, 30 milligrams at night, what's happening again, as from the previous lecture, is that this progesterone is going into the skin and going into the oil fraction of the progesterone and will not appear on the blood test. It will not appear on the blood test. It's because oil and water do not mix. Okay? But if you put it on the skin and it goes into the chylomicrons and the red blood cell membranes, the oil fraction of the blood, that is the free level of progesterone. Therefore, even if you're the autoimmune patient down here, this gray line, okay, because topically it's going into the free portion of the progesterone, which is the effective portion of the progesterone, you can maintain a 40-week pregnancy with 60 milligrams a day. Okay, because when you put it on the skin, okay, it's going into the free portion of the progesterone, not the sex hormone binding globulin. So again, these progesterone levels in pregnancy, these are blood levels, okay, and not the free portion. Okay, so that's the great secret. Now, if you want to, you could increase the topical progesterone if you want, if you're having trouble maintaining pregnancy, but many times that's not necessary. All you need to do is use 60 milligrams of progesterone topically, okay, so that the free portion, which is the effective portion of the progesterone, in the oil fraction, and you can maintain a full pregnancy at 40 weeks with 60 milligrams topically. So again, the one thing that you need to remember, which is the most important point of giving progesterone during the first trimester of pregnancy, is that you cannot stop taking progesterone. Okay, so you cannot stop taking progesterone for one day. So what happens if you stop suddenly, it will create a miscarriage. So in other words, you take progesterone, and if you stop for one day and you forget to take progesterone, stopping suddenly will create a miscarriage. Because what will happen is you'll stop suddenly, and then the dropping progesterone levels will create a miscarriage. So once you can go up on progesterone as much as you want, okay? But when you come down on progesterone, you have to come down very slowly, because if you stop suddenly, progesterone levels will fall, and this will create a miscarriage. So this is extremely important to remember. Once you start progesterone, you cannot stop suddenly. So again, remember that topical progesterone is only found in the saliva test. It's not found in the serum. So again, here's the same graph. Again, on the y-axis, you have progesterone level, and at time 0, you give them a skin dose, transdermal percutaneous progesterone cream. At time 0, up at the top, you give them the progesterone cream, put it on their skin, and you can see the saliva levels go up at 3 hours and come back down at about 8 hours. And so the saliva test goes up and down on topical progesterone, but the serum test, you can see, only goes slightly up and then comes back down. So again, I'd like to re-emphasize this, that topical progesterone barely shows up on the blood serum test, but the saliva test actually gives an accurate portrayal of its presence in the body. So because the saliva levels go up and down about 8 hours, I suggest you give the progesterone BID, or twice a day, or TID, which is 3 times a day at 60 milligrams a day. So you can do 30 milligrams in the morning and 30 milligrams at night, or you can do 20-20-20. For some people who are very tenuous, it's better to break that up to 3 times a day. So it's important to remember that the topical progesterone is in the oil fraction of blood, and that's the active form of progesterone. So again, the previous chart that shows progesterone levels keep going up and up and up. Again, that progesterone is bound to sex hormone binding globulin, and that's in the water fraction of the blood. Okay, but again, when you give topical progesterone or transdermal progesterone, what happens is that it's in the chylomicrons, or the small little oil droplets in the blood, or on the red blood cell membranes, and that's in the oil fraction of the blood. And so water and oil don't mix, and since it's the active form, so 60 milligrams a day topical is enough to prevent preterm delivery. So the autoimmune patient has progesterone antibodies, and the progesterone antibodies are in the water phase. So this is really important to remember. And since water and oil don't mix, the progesterone antibodies cannot attack what's in the oil fraction of the blood, which is a topical transdermal progesterone. So the topical will still work to maintain the pregnancy for a patient who has very low progesterone because of the progesterone antibodies. So again, I like to taper off at 16 weeks, tapering off very slowly at 10 milligrams per week. So at week 17, I'd go at 50 milligrams, week 18, 40 milligrams, week 19, 30 milligrams, and so on. Again, I want to re-emphasize that if you stop it suddenly at week 16, you'll probably be okay if the patient does not have progesterone antibodies and is not autoimmune. But if the patient is autoimmune and does have progesterone antibodies, what you will see when you slowly begin to taper off the progesterone is that you may have contractions or lower back pain. And then that's the signal to you as a physician to increase the progesterone back up to 60 milligrams or higher, and continue the 60 milligrams per day for the entire rest of the pregnancy. So again, maybe the patients will be like 2 out of 100, 1 out of 50, that it's an autoimmune patient you didn't know. And to be able to taper it off the progesterone very slowly at week 16 gives you the opportunity to go back up without losing the pregnancy, and then continue the progesterone throughout the entire pregnancy so that you won't lose the pregnancy. And again, what happens is it's 90% first pass inactivated by the liver. So again, you take the progesterone in your orally, and it goes into the intestines, it goes to the portal vein, goes to the liver, and 90% is inactivated. Okay, suppose you gave it vaginally or rectally. Okay, it's important to remember that that area of the body is drained by the portal vein in part, but it's also drained by the internal pudendal vein. Okay. And what happens is some of the blood goes directly to the liver and is 90% inactivated, but the other portion of blood goes directly into the body. Okay, so again, rectally or vaginally is not as effective as topically because some of the blood goes to the liver and some of the blood goes to the body. Okay, so if you're taking it vaginally or rectally, okay, it's 200 milligrams a day divided BID or TID. Okay. Again, this is quite interesting. I had one lady who was, I believe she was about 40 years old, and she had like eight children. She had a miscarriage. She came to me, and I gave her topical progesterone because previously she had a miscarriage. Baby came out fine, and she gets pregnant again. And then she did not talk to me. She went to her regular MD, and she says, I need progesterone. The MD says, I don't think so, but I'll give it to you anyway. And the physician prescribed her 75 milligrams as a vaginal troche. Okay, so she used the 75 milligrams, and again, that was not enough to save the baby. Okay, and the reason why is when you stick it in the vagina, okay, part of the blood goes directly to the portal vein, and that 75 milligrams, or part of the 75 milligrams, is 90% inactivated. Okay, so again, the route comparison, if you're taking it topically, transdermally, you take 60 milligrams a day divided BID, TID, okay, because again, the levels go up and down about 7-8 hours, okay. Rectally or vaginally, you can take it divided BID, TID, okay, 200 milligrams, and orally, 400 to 600 milligrams divided BID, TID, okay. All right, so a pregnant patient calls me bleeding with contractions out of the blue. I have about a dozen or so of those patients. Okay, so the first thing I do is go through all their herbs, nutritional supplements, and look for abortifacients, all those herbs, mint toothpaste, pomegranate. I had one lady, she was having she was taking a prenatal vitamin that had pomegranate in it, right? And again, pomegranate is touted as a antioxidant, and it's a great antioxidant. It's really nutritious, tastes great. Pomegranate juice is great, okay, but again, it's traditionally used to create miscarriages. And if you put in your prenatal vitamin, I would think that's kind of disingenuous, okay? And I've seen that happen. Okay, again, I would give her immediately topical progesterone, 60 milligrams divided BID. Okay, if that doesn't help, you could double it or triple it. Okay, again, to counteract the herbs that are abortifacients that need to wash out of the body. You could give her magnesium citrate to relax the uterus, not magnesium oxide. Magnesium citrate is more bioavailable. Okay, bed rest, no heavy lifting. You can double or triple the progesterone to 120 milligrams a day divided by TID or more if not. Okay, and then I learned this from a midwife. I've used this twice. If all that fails, okay, you can take half a glass of wine. Okay, and again, we understand what fetal alcohol syndrome is. We know that alcohol is bad for the baby. Okay, but if you don't do anything, you've done all this stuff, and now the lady is still having a cramping. She's still about to miscarry. If you don't do anything, she's going to miscarry in a couple hours. So I heard this from midwives. I'm like, okay, take a half glass of wine, right? And she does that, and everything stops. Everything quiets down. And I had two patients where I had to do this. They did bed rest after that, and they came out with 2 perfect babies. So again, I can't recommend that. But again, if you're up against the wall, you're talking miscarriage. Again, we're not talking about wine every day. We're talking about half a glass of wine for the entire pregnancy. Okay, so let's talk about the timing of prenatal nutrition. So I had this one MD, he was my mentor, and he was board certified in pathology, occupational medicine, and pediatrics. I think he was in residency for 11 or 12 years, and he had this great paper, and unfortunately I could not find that paper again. But I read the paper, and what he was saying is that, he told me is that the sperm and egg are in suspended animation asleep until 12 weeks before conception. So what happens is that 12 weeks of conception, it starts taking in nutrition to build up the sperm and egg, and then that's when to concentrate all your prenatal nutrition, especially during this time. So if you have a drug addict who's a previous drug addict now trying to get pregnant and they're wondering if their baby is going to be affected, the answer is no, probably not. All you have to do is make sure that they live a clean life 12 weeks before conception, okay, and then give them a whole bunch of good nutrition 12 weeks before conception. So that's the practical take-home application, okay. So right before 12 weeks before conception, all the sperm and egg wake up, and that's again for the man and the female, and they start taking nutrition 12 weeks before conception. Okay, so the nearest thing that I could find is that if you look at breeding borers for veterinarians, they tend to think that 60 days before breeding, you start a good nutrition of zinc and selenium. So you need to get good sperm. Cows, they give them selenium, copper, and zinc, okay? There's a growing body of evidence from studies in vitro embryo cultures that elements within the genome may be epigenetically labile in early nutrition as early as the periconceptual phase that may result in subsequent alterations in gene expression, modulating health throughout the life cycle yielding transgenerational nutritional effects. So I can't emphasize this strongly, but you need to start taking the prenatal nutrition 12 weeks before conception. Okay. So let's talk about particular nutritional elements. We'll talk about chromium, okay? So there's an Anderson review article using supplemental chromium picolinate has shown to have beneficial effects without any documented side effects on people with varying degrees of glucose intolerance, ranging from mild glucose intolerance to overt diabetes type 2, 200 to 1,000 micrograms per day. He cites a 10-month study which 833 people with diabetes type 2 in China as well as U.S. studies. Higher doses were better. Okay. Jonovec, gestational diabetes, 10 women placebo, 10 women 200 mics a day, 10 women 400 mics a day, chromium picolinate, and at 8 weeks, chromium picolinate supplementation for gestational diabetic women improves glucose intolerance and lowers hyperinsulinemia and C-peptide versus placebo. So again, I think earlier I found a paper from Europe that had 400 gestational diabetes type 2, and the guy claimed that he was able to reverse the diabetes, gestational diabetes in pregnancy, but I could not find that paper. Okay, so let's talk about chromium, okay? And here's the global production of chromium ore by country in 2016, chromium content, okay? So the dark purple is a huge amount of chromium, okay? And then the dark blue is lots of chromium, and then the light blue is a little chromium, and then the gray is like no chromium, okay? So as you can see in North and South America, there are no chromium deposits at all. Maybe there's some pockets up in Montana, okay, Nevada, but overall, there's no chromium in North and South America. I think Brazil produces some chromium, okay, but you look at it, it's South Africa that produces chromium, India, okay, Russia, you know, that Middle Eastern area, okay. Now, the reason why this is significant is that there's no chromium in the soil. There's no chromium in the grass. The cow eats the grass. There's no chromium in the cow. You eat the cow, and you have no chromium. So the one reason why we're friends with South Africa is we use chrome from South Africa, and we use it to chrome the barrels of our tanks and guns. Okay. So again, there's no chromium deposit in North and South America. The vast majority of Americans are chromium deficient. It's important for tendon repair, okay, and I can't emphasize this enough that all Americans are virtually chromium deficient. So I did have one associate, he was a psychiatrist, neurologist, and he had halfway torn through anterior cruciate ligament in the knee, and so he goes to his friend who's an orthopod. He goes, well, if you operate on this, what's your success rate? And the guy looks at it and he goes, well, I think you get 50%. And the guy goes, well, I don't like that. So he goes to the weight room, starts talking to the people there in the weight room gym, and they go, well, what about chromium? He goes, well, I don't know anything about chromium. So there's this big study on chromium. He finds out that chromium is extremely important for tendon repair. So he starts taking chromium, and in about 3 months, his anterior cruciate ligament is back to normal. It had repaired itself. Okay, so again, in all these tendon rips, you know, you take MSM, which is sulfur, because we're all deficient in sulfur, and chromium is extremely important for tendon repair. Okay, it's also a cofactor for insulin for gestational diabetes. Okay, so here's another slide. What I found out is chromium nicotinic works, chromium picolate does not work. University of Texas, Austin, Texas. He had 43 sedentary obese women for 9 weeks. Some of them took chromium picolinate, 400 mics a day. Another group of women took 400 mics a day plus exercise, said significant weight decrease. Chromium picolinate, 400 mics a day plus exercise, no weight change at all. Okay, and placebo plus exercise, some weight increase. All right, so there's a rat study. Okay, chromium picolate versus chromium nicotinate. Rat study, they fed chromium picolinate, chromium nicotinate, chromium chloride. And then basically they stuck a tube down the rat's throat, fed them chromium picolinate, chromium nicotinate, chromium chloride, and basically the chromium nicotinate rats had 3 to 8 times fold higher than chromium picolinate or chromium chloride. And by 6 to 12 weeks post tube, okay, they had 1.8 to 3.8 times higher in chromium nicotinate than chromium picolinate. So chromium picolinate, use chromium, so take-home messages, use chromium nicotinate. It has a better absorption 3 times than chromium. You can also maybe chromium polynicotate works, or GTF chromium, but not chromium picolinate. Chromium picolinate is associated with in vitro DNA damage, but not in vivo DNA damage. So I would use 200 to 400 micrograms per day to control or reverse gestational diabetes. I would kind of err on the 400 micrograms a day, and I would use chromium nicotinate. Do not use chromium picolinate because of the poor absorption rate. Okay, so we all know about folate for spina bifida, and some patients have methylation issues. So again, L-methylfolate is the active form of folate to prevent spina bifida. Okay, so again, MTHFR gene, 10 to 15% of Caucasians have trouble with methylation. And the MTHFR gene, 25% of Hispanics have difficulty in methylating folate. Okay, so about 40 to 60% of the population has genetic polymorphisms that impair the conversion of supplemental folic acid to its active form of L-methylfolate. So I would use 1,000 micrograms per day or more of L-methylfolate. Okay, and again, the CDC recommends 4,000 micrograms per day of folic acid of B9 if the patient has a a previous history of neural tube defect. So again, if this is true, okay, where you're dealing with a previous neural tube defect, make sure to watch out for intestinal malabsorption. Again, I think it's like 14% of all Americans have some kind of parasite. And when you're talking parasites, now you're talking about intestinal malabsorption. And now when you give them vitamins, the vitamins don't go into the body. So you want to look out for that. If they have, it's fairly common. Like you'll have people who are intolerant, for that, have some kind of celiac disease, or they're kind of intestinally intolerant. They have some kind of bad bacteria in their gut. They have some kind of wheat allergy, right? And you want to look out for intestinal malabsorption. So you may have to cleanse them of parasites first, or get rid of their parasites, or make sure that they're not having an intestinal malabsorption. Okay, so let's talk about iodine. Okay, and again, cretinism is extreme iodine deficiency. It's a decrease or absent thyroid function and thyroid hormone production. Untreated, it leads to severely stunted growth, mental growth of the newborn, and congenital hypothyroidism. So again, that's what you get. Okay. So in 2013, the Bogma review article on iodine and pregnancy reviewed papers on Medline between January 1980 and 2011. The difference in IQ is about 6.9 to 10.2 in children who are deficient with iodine versus not deficient. An IQ of 132 is in the top 2% of the population. IQ of 100 is average. And 68% of people have an IQ between 85 and 115. So if you can give iodine 12 weeks before conception, okay, and you can increase the IQ by 10, that's a big win, okay, because it's pretty cheap. Solarkia, 40 children aged 7 to 13 in iodine-deficient villages in Kiga and Randa in Iran. In all groups, children were given iodized salt. Okay. Group 1, iodized oil before conception. Okay. IQ is 102. Okay, plus or minus 1 cent. Group 2, iodized oil during pregnancy, 93. Group 3, mother no iodine, 95. Okay. So I advise to take iodine again, 12 weeks before conception at least. Okay, so let's talk about the iodine dosage, okay? In the early 1900s, we came out with Lugol's iodine, which is diatomic ion, I2, and I-, which is iodine ion, okay? You need both iodine and iodide because some tissues preferentially take up one versus the other. Okay, historically, 12.5 milligrams to 37.5 milligrams per day as late as in 1995 in a book, Pharmaceutical Sciences. Okay, and again in Japan, the normal average Japanese has an average intake of 12.5 milligrams per day. Okay, now iodized salt is 0.05 milligrams per gram. Okay, which is just enough to stave off goiter. Okay, so the RDA after World War II is based on the minimum amount to prevent goiter, stupidity, and hypothyroidism. So US RDA is 0.15 milligrams per day. Okay, so the average Japanese takes in 13.8 or 12.5 by some other people. Okay, and again, the Japanese breast cancer rate is 2 to 3 times lower than that of Americans. So again, the iodized salt is just enough to prevent goiter, but for optimal functioning of the human body, I believe it's much higher, okay? And so the iodine caveats, according to Jonathan Wright, MD, Tahoma Clinic, iodine seems to convert strong estradiol to estrone and estrone to weak estriol, okay? So fibrocystic breast disease and ovarian cysts tend to get better with iodine. Lugol's is cheap, but stains the clothes, okay? Gastric upset and unpleasant taste. 1 drop of 2% is about 3 milligrams, okay? Iorol, a pill, doesn't cause gastric upset, does not stain clothes, but it's a little bit expensive for the patient, but that's what I like to use. The most common side effect is a bromine detox. And do not take iodine with a Hashimoto's thyroiditis, or otherwise their thyroiditis is going to get worse. You have to get rid of the Hashimoto's permanently before you give them iodine, okay? Make sure that. Okay, so again, Hashimoto's must be cured permanently first before using iodine, otherwise the Hashimoto's will flare. Okay, so this is a bromine detox rash, a bromine rash. So if you look and Google this, you'll find a bromine rash on people when they start to take iodine. Again, this is not an iodine allergy, okay? You do not have iodine allergies. What you do have is a bromine detox. So again, if you recall, bromine and iodine are above one another in the periodic table. And as you take iodine, it will begin to force out bromine. So in every patient given iodine, I've had a bromine detox in America. Every patient, okay? Bromine is the same valence and similar size. The most common side effect is vivid dreams at night, heart palpitations, okay, sore fingers, hair loss, the throat closes off. It can look like an anaphylactic shock reaction. You get pimples or a rash like that. I had vivid dreams, okay. My wife, I gave it to her. She started having heart palpitations. She goes, man, I don't like this iodine, man. I'm getting heart palpitations. I said, no, honey, that's a bromine detox, okay. So then I started taking the iodine, and what happened is I started to have, on my right hand, but my left hand, I started having fingertips that got all sore, right? And I started going, hey, man, what's happening? Man, I started whining, and my wife goes, no, honey, you're having a bromine detox. So I stopped the iodine, and about 2 weeks later, it went away. Okay, so again, you can have hair loss, you can have throat closes off. My sister-in-law, we started giving her iodine about 30 milligrams. She was driving around Austin. She's been here for 20 years. She's driving around Austin. All of a sudden, she doesn't know where she is. Okay, I said, no, let's back off on the iodine. The bromine's coming out too much. Is this affecting your mentation? Okay, so where can you find bromine? Even if you drank a soda 20 years ago, they used brominated vegetable oil to combine the citric oils with the water, okay? And they'll use brominated vegetable oil or BVO. Pepsi and Coke in the last 2 years has quietly taken that out, so you can drink it now and not get BVO. Dough conditioner, potassium bromide, is used in a lot of the commercial bakery products. Some of them do not use potassium bromide, but the dough conditioner, when they say that, it's potassium bromide. Okay, so you're getting a dose of bromine there. You can use it in swimming pools. Okay, and so if you go to a swimming pool, instead of chlorinating pool, use bromine or a hot tub, and you get a dose of bromine there. It's used in asthma inhalers. It's used 20 years ago. I guess like about as early as like 2 or 3 years ago, you could find BVO or brominated vegetable oil in sodas. But now it's only found in sodas, in Walmart colas, and some Dollar General colas, okay? Bromocriptine is used to stop lactation. Again, that's bromide, okay? So again, that's where you're getting it from. And again, if you drank 20 years ago a soda, you still have a dose of bromine. And when you take the iodine, you're going to get a bromine detox. So Melchenko shows that bromine is 50 times higher in thyroid cancers. Rats fed bromine developed goiter. Fletcher's MD suspects that 20% of schizophrenia is due to brominism. Okay, so how do you detox from bromine? So you can take a zeolite. You can get some zeolites from Amazon. There's 300 different zeolites. They're microporous aluminum silicate materials, commonly used as commercial adsorbents. You can just take it orally as you bromine detox, and the bromine gets stuck in the middle there, and you can pass it out through the gut. I usually start at 3 milligrams a day of Iodine and slowly increase 6 milligrams a week, but you may have to go slower than that. If you get heart palpitations, you give magnesium or give zeolite, which will trap the bromine. You can take vitamin C, 3 to 10 grams for women with absorption problems. You can use unrefined sea salt, a half a teaspoon in water, BID with selenium, 200 to 400 micrograms a day. Another common thing that you do is you start taking the iodine and you start getting really tired. And so what you need to do to counter that tiredness is you need to give some ATP mitochondrial support. Give them vitamin B2, vitamin B3, which is ATP cofactors from Optimox.com at www.optimox.com. And then the tiredness will go away. So that's one of the things. You give them iodine, all of a sudden, wow, man, they feel tired. They should be feeling better, okay? Well, they got a vitamin B2, B3 deficiency, okay? Okay, so here's something really interesting. Iodine for diabetes, right? Fletcher's MD had a 320-pound woman with diabetes type 1. She came to the ER with a random blood sugar of 1,380 milligrams per deciliter instead on insulin and a home glucometer. 2 weeks later, given 50 milligrams per day for of iodine for fibrocystic breast disease. 1 week later, she requested lowering of insulin because she was beginning to become hypoglycemic. And 4 weeks later, she had a random glucose of 98 milligrams per deciliter. So Fletcher said, hey, man, you're doing good work, okay? But she goes, man, I didn't change any diabetic. I have no diabetic medications. I haven't changed my diet. But she felt that the big difference was iodine. So 2 years later, she's 70 pounds lighter, excellent glucose control with 50 milligrams a day of iodine. Now he has 12 diabetics. 6 cases have weaned off of all insulin. Their A1C is less than 5.8. Average random blood glucose is less than 100 on 50 milligram to 100 milligrams per day of iodine. All the diabetics have excellent diabetes type 2 control and have reduced their medications. Okay? So basically, Fletcher's MD concludes that if you're a type 1 diabetic and if the C-peptide is measurable, okay, that means that there's some insulin is produced. If there's no C-peptide, then you cannot get off insulin. So what you do is you do a C-peptide, you find some C-peptide, then give them some 50, work your way up to 50 to 100 milligrams of iodine, okay, and then maybe you can get off your insulin or reduce it, okay. And this is a really interesting thing. Fletcher's had one patient, right? And they gave him like high doses of iodine, and the one patient had a fatty liver with esophageal varices and esophageal bleeding. And he started on iodine, the GI bleeding stopped, okay, and the varicose veins on her stomach and esophagus disappeared. So this is really interesting, you know. So anyway, does anybody have a hypothesis for this out in the audience? Again, I had given this originally to a group of residents. So this is my hypothesis for diabetes. Does anybody know why they give low-level antibiotics to animals? Well, what happens is they used to give low-level antibiotics to animals and the animals would gain weight and grow faster. Okay, and and they give it now to pork and in the past chickens, right? And so now I think the law is that you can't give antibiotics to chickens, right? And they're trying to phase that out. Okay. Also, if you give low-level antibiotics to chickens, then you're making antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Okay. So what happens is that when you give low-level antibiotics to chickens, the gut microbiome changes from the low-dose antibiotics, causing mice to gain weight. And similar alterations in humans taking antibiotics, especially children, might be adding to the obesity epidemic. And so there's some people who think that that if you get a piece of pork and it may have some of these gut bacteria that is causing a change in the gut microbiome, that's like creating a problem where it's actually creating kind of more of a it's adding to the diabetic type 2 problem, okay? So bacteria in treated mice activated more genes that turned carbohydrates into short-chain fatty acids, and these turned on genes related to lipid conversion in the liver, okay? It could be fatty liver. It could be that dysregulation of a gut microbiome has been linked to the development of fatty liver and disease. Different species of bacteria in the gut metabolize nutrients differently, and accumulation of fat within the liver and triggering the inflammatory cascade. So my hypothesis is that if you give like 100 to 50 milligrams of iodine a day, as you recall, if you go camping, it used to be that if you want to get water out of the stream, you could take diatomic iodine, which is I2, not I-, and it'll kill the bad bacteria in the drinking water for camping. So I don't know, maybe you're taking diatomic iodine and at 50 to 100 milligrams a day, and it's killing the bad bacteria in the gut. That's adding to the diabetes type 2 and fatty liver. So I'm not sure about this, but if you have a patient with fatty liver or diabetes type 2 with a measurable C-reactive protein, it might be worth trying 50 to 100 milligrams of iodine and see if you can get them better, okay? All right. So in conclusion, most miscarriages that occur between 5 to 8 weeks are progesterone deficiency or herbs that create miscarriage. You can get a progesterone deficiency from low production above age 35 years old or a cortisol steal, okay, from fear, stress, anxiety. The common herbs that cause miscarriage are pomegranate, aloe, sage, mint, thyme, celery, vitex. You can find this in the toothpaste. Again, anything on the skin is 10 times the oral dose, so it's very common to use rosemary in your shampoo. The rosemary is used as an antioxidant to keep the oils from going rancid. But again, rosemary is traditionally used by ancient cultures to cause miscarriage. So if you have rosemary in your shampoo, this could be causing a miscarriage and causing a problem. It's very common for people to be drinking pomegranate, and pomegranate was even marketed to be taken during pregnancy. I don't know what they're thinking. They're thinking maybe antioxidants that taste good, all these nutritional things, these, anthocyanidins or something like that, and those are good, okay, but again, they have to take into account the hormone disruptive capability of pomegranate. And again, if you're putting pomegranate in a prenatal vitamin, I think that's disingenuous. You really need to change your prenatal vitamin. Okay, so again, conclusion, progesterone supplementation. You can use transdermal progesterone, 60 milligrams a day, divided BID, divided TID, right after conception, but not before. Again, if you take it before conception, the ovaries will look up, okay, and think that you're pregnant and not ovulate. So you need to take it after conception and not before conception, okay. At risk, okay, are previous miscarriages, bleeding over the age of 35 years old, cramping, lower back pain, okay, people who are under a lot of psychological stress, okay. You can double or triple the dose, that's no problem. You can go up immediately, okay. The most important thing to remember about this is you cannot suddenly stop. If you suddenly stop your progesterone, the dropping progesterones will trigger a miscarriage, okay. So again, I forgot to mention earlier in the lecture that you cannot stop one day. The danger of taking progesterone is that if you stop and forget to take it one day, the dropping progesterones will cause a miscarriage. So once you start going on progesterone, you must be sure to take it every day and then slowly taper it off at week 16, okay? At week 16, you start to taper it off. You have lower back pain or contractions, go back up and continue to take the progesterone throughout the entire pregnancy. And after the pregnancy is finished, you might want to look for an autoimmune disease. Okay, eliminate xenoestrogens. Again, another problem is that if they're heavy set, okay, they have a lot of extra weight, okay, then the fat is very thick, okay, and then the transdermal progesterone can't get into the person. So if they're very heavy set, make sure you put the progesterone on the inside of the thighs and arms so the subcutaneous fat is thin. Okay, in conclusion, other advice. Okay, in high-risk patients, no strenuous walking, no heavy lifting, bed rest. Okay, no psychological or physical stress to prevent a cortisol steal. Okay, and wine, half a glass for the entire pregnancy as a last resort. Okay, conclusion, nutrition, take a good prenatal vitamin, make sure there's no herbs that cause miscarriage, no oxides, the chelated ones are better, start 12 weeks before conception. Chromium nicotinate, 200 to 400 micrograms per day, or maybe picolinate or GTF. I don't know. I haven't seen any studies on that for prevention of gestational diabetes, gestational diabetes, and better control of diabetes type 1 and type 2. Okay, we may use Lugol's iodine or Iodorol, 12.5 milligrams a day for 12 weeks before conception. Watch out for the bromine detox. Do not detox into the baby. Okay, L-methylfolate, 1,000 micrograms a day or more for spina bifida. Okay, and here are the notes. All right, here are the notes. Okay, so again, thank you very much. We'll see you again. I have another lecture on infertility as well as the use of progesterone and estradiol for menopause. So thank you again for sitting through this. I know this is very tiring, but here are all the pearls I've learned from 20 years of preventing miscarriage. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and your patience for going through this. This is Dr. Renwen Yi, or pen name Peter Eckhart.